All right, so I am testing out to see if I can create some videos discussing my journey to Buddhism and why I became a Buddhist and what I found so attractive in Buddhism. And so I don't know, I haven't really made live videos before, so I was trying to do a live video and just have it directly onto social media. But it seems like YouTube only allows 15 seconds, and Instagram, I think, up to 3 minutes, and I do think I'm going to need more than 3 minutes to talk about this stuff. So I'm going to test this out on my phone and see if I can upload these videos. If not, I'll figure something out, I'm sure. But so my journey to Buddhism, I really don't want to do something so chronological because I don't know that there's a whole lot of people that would really be interested in all my life. Everybody's got their own lives, and I'm sure that my life isn't all that interesting for everybody. But so I don't really want to do a chronological step-by-step thing, just talking about issues that I thought about over the years, and you may get into some details of my life doing that, because this is from my perspective of why I became a Buddhist. So obviously it's going to have some perspectives from my life, just not like a chronological, detailed oriented thing that of my personal life. So one of the things that I can say is, my dad passed away in 2014. He was an atheist, and my grandmother was a devout Christian. So I had, growing up, two very distinct philosophies that were brought to me from a very young age. My dad being the atheist, and my grandmother being the Christian, and gave me, I guess, a certain perspective on life and truth. How people of different religious views or non-religious views can be very convinced of their philosophies, and we all are, right? So, I mean, I think my own thoughts. I don't know how you think or your perspectives on things and what made you. I can only know from my own perspective the things that I have thought and the way that my own mind has developed that has convinced me of the things that I personally believe. So it really wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to say that that I am definitely right and that other people are wrong. There's the Baptists that would be convinced that their version of Christianity is right. The Catholics are convinced that everybody else, well, not all Catholics, but a certain section of Catholics would be convinced that everybody else is going to go to hell. Same thing with the Eastern Orthodox Christians. And there's obviously different brands within those large group of Christians that don't believe everybody else is necessarily going to hell, but that they're obviously the ones who are right and got the truth, and then you have the Mormons and the Methodists and all these different thousands or at least hundreds, but possibly thousands of different denominations, each one claiming that they're right about their doctrine and their views of Christianity. But also, the Muslims that they're going to hold very firmly that they're the ones who are right and everybody else is, headed towards doom. Not 100% sure of all the theology of the Muslim religion, but then there is, other religions, Eastern religions like Hinduism and what I partake in, Buddhism, and I believe there's a religion, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's either Sikh or Sikh, Sikh, I believe. At any rate, there's a lot of different religious philosophies, and each one claiming to be the right way. And in some cases, atheists can be just as adamant about being the ones who are right, that really none of it matters, because they believe that there is no God or supernatural. Now, I make the distinction there because Buddhism is unusual as a religion in the sense that to a degree, it's not even a religion because it allows for any philosophy or theology about the existence of God. So there are atheists who are Buddhists. There are agnostics who are Buddhists, but there are also people who believe in a variety of gods who are Buddhist. There are people who believe in one God and are Buddhist. There's a common thread amongst Buddhists to at least believe in a level of supernatural, but there are Buddhists who don't believe in any supernatural as well. So it is really, really hard to pin down Buddhism as far as a religion in its any declaration about God. It is the only religion that I am personally aware of that has what I believe is called a non-theistic philosophy. And it's not atheistic, it's non-theistic. And what that means is the difference between atheistic and non-theistic is atheistic would be a firm declaration that there is no God. Non-theistic is what you believe pertaining to God isn't important. So if you believe that there is a God, you can be a Buddhist. And if you believe that there isn't a God, you can be a Buddhist. So there really isn't any firm declaration that you have to believe or not believe one way or the other. So God or gods, it's just not important in Buddhist philosophy, because in Buddhist philosophy, it's more important how we live, and to live in such a way to not bring suffering upon myself, but also to not cause suffering to others. So obviously, murder would be wrong in Buddhist philosophy, killing, because you do not want to be a part of causing others to suffer. So there is, stealing would be wrong, taking somebody else's possessions, because that would cause somebody else suffering, taking their possessions. And the cause of suffering is actually kind of sophisticated in a way, because they try to translate this, and even the original language may not have perfectly captured maybe what the enlightened Buddha's thoughts were on it. From what he saw, we use language to communicate a topic, and sometimes the words we have do not exist, or the words we have do not, not that they don't exist, that the right words don't exist, is what I should have said. So the words we need to convey certain concepts, our language has not evolved to the point of properly conveying the proper messages. And so sometimes we have, and in philosophy this happens, not just in religious sections or in Buddhism, but where sometimes we have to either invent words or recycle a word, using it in a different way. Maybe even taking from a more ancient language sometimes, and so that there's no misunderstandings, and we define our words. So philosophers, in many cases, will tell you what they mean by a word, and they're not being condescending, even though it sounds that way. They're trying to clarify what they mean when they use a certain term, so that certain concepts that don't actually have a word that really truly conveys what they want to say. So, so in Buddhism, this kind of happens with the cause of suffering, where some translations will say, that it's desire. Some of them will say it's clinging, and there is maybe connotation to these words that doesn't properly convey the essence of what is actually causing the sufferings, because as we get closer towards, and I'm obviously not enlightened yet, but towards enlightenment, we start to realize that you can't stop desiring things completely, because even the desire to attain enlightenment, and you can try to redefine things and say, well, there's the holy desires and there's the unholy desires, but really, in essence, it's not desire by itself. There's something more subtle, and clinging is probably a little bit closer to the concept where I can't let go of something, but it's deeper. It's something more subtle, because it is the constant agitation we walk around with, where I can't clear my thoughts. I can't focus. The things that get in my way, the cloudiness. So when I'm sitting here and I try to meditate, many times, you try to clear your thoughts and you start breathing. And as you do this, thoughts will pop up into your head. And this sense of not being able to stop, not being able to pause, not being able to properly reflect, and to see things accurately as they are, not as I want them to be, but as they really are. So in Buddhism, there is an essence of delusion, but delusion sounds like a harsh word because we like to use it as an insult and say, hey, you're delusional. But in this sense, it's not an insult, because we're all a little delusional. Every human being has a little bit of delusion. And used in this way, what delusion means is the inability to see reality as it really is, and we live in a sort of false reality that we create in our heads. And so in Buddhism, what we really want to do is to get closer and closer to trying to see things as they are. And like, for example, you have a feeling, and something is pleasurable, and just say, okay, that feels good. Okay. And not take it any farther than that. Like, just recognizing the fact that to you, that feels good. Or this is painful. And just the reality of this being painful, and say that, well, that's kind of just almost so simple, it's stupid almost because of its simpleness. But at the same time, we don't do that a lot of times. We use not speaking right. We use terms that qualify. Things like good or bad, evil, and really, in the strictest Buddhist sense, there is no sin concept. Now, you'll hear some Buddhists use the word sin or whatever, either translated or misconception. But in reality, from the actual Buddhist teachings, there isn't really a sin concept the same way that Christians would use it, because In the Christian philosophy, if you do sin, it's something that God has said, do not do. And by doing it, you are sinning, and it makes you evil. Sin is evil, okay? And righteousness is, when you don't sin. In Buddhism, it's not about evil and good. It's more about attaining a state of non-suffering. So, there are certain things that cause me or others to suffer. It's not evil or good, it's just, it's suffering. And we want to get away from that suffering and want to get to a state of not suffering. So doing things that harm people or myself are things that I should not do. So not because there's a God that's going to chastise me and send me to hell, but because I am going to be in perpetual suffering until I quit doing those harmful things. So it's a different philosophy, and you could say, you produce similar, and they're not the same, but you produce similar results in action, because in both cases, whether Christian or Buddhist, the Christian is going to try to do good things because they don't want to get, they don't want to go to hell. They don't want to get punished by God. The Buddhist is going to do good things and not things that are harmful, simply because we know that it reduces suffering for ourselves and for others, and our end goal. And I did use the word good and bad, I think, in there, even though technically we're not supposed to, but that's the way language is like, as we talk and we communicate topics that we think about, we just grab words. And so sometimes that causes misunderstanding of contradictions and things that you need to say, well, this technically doesn't exist. We don't have this in our philosophy, and then we'll use the word for it anyway. And I think that happens a lot in all forms of communication and all forms of philosophy and even in science. And an example of this in science would be when like, for example, the scientific method, and the way we develop a theory. And a scientific theory is supposed to be different than a hypothesis. But you'll hear a lot of even scientists, educated scientists, who will throw around the word theory for something that should have been called a hypothesis. So there are hypotheses and theories, and so sometimes we do this in language. We just grab a word and we just trying to speak fast, and we just throw the word out there. And technically you say, well, that's not the correct way to use the word, but if you understand what the person is trying to say, shouldn't get too caught up in the words used. Now, if it does get confusing, you can ask for clarification, and that's really what good communication is. What I don't like, personally, is when people get so caught on debating that they are looking for a way to prove you wrong. Whether you're right or not wrong is irrelevant. They just want to prove you wrong. And so they'll get caught up on individual words like, oh, you use this word, see, that proves it. Or they try to catch you in some sort of contradiction that maybe your actual thought process didn't have that contradiction. But they're trying to force a contradiction because of the words you used. And so I don't like debates. I like discussions where there's an actual genuine attempt to understand what the other person is saying. And it's not about like, oh, you said this, that's a contradiction. You can ask for clarification if you genuinely didn't understand it, and see if the person is actually contradicting themselves, if it could be that way, because we're all human. We can make mistakes and not see the contradiction in our thoughts. But sometimes there's no contradiction. Sometimes it's just the way you're thinking about it and in the words you use. So, I like discussion. I do not like debate, because debate mentality, somebody has to win, even if they're dead wrong.